Hi out there, and welcome to our latest Table Talk. It's the start of Men's Health Week, and I'm Andy Hetzel. I'm Vice President for Communications at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. We are here today at the Detroit Shipping Company. We're out to lunch today, me and my crew here. Most of our wives would say that we're out to lunch all the time, but today we are here to talk about some of the issues that we men face around our health and around our kids' health. And I'm joined by some friends, Ryan Ermanni from Fox 2 here in Detroit, Vince McKinnon, who works in our wellness area at Blue Cross, and the great Herman Moore, a great Detroit Lions veteran that I'm sure that most of you already recognize. And we're here to just have a good conversation today around some of the issues that we dads, and we all are dads, face in our own lives and also at home with our families. And before we start, guys, just a little quiz. How many of you have been to the doctor once this year? How many? Awesome. That is awesome. You know why? Because men don't go to the doctor. That's one of the things that Vince is going to cover. I'm going to kick it off with you. Just Vince, in your work professionally, what separates men from women as it relates to how we manage our health, and what are some of the issues that men face about our health that we should be concerned about and that our audience should be as well?
Right. I think the big thing is men, they have the macho attitude. They kind of mask what's going on physically. They want to hide it, and then they have a fear of a diagnosis. So I think men tend not to go to the doctor. They want to tough it out, whereas women, if they see something wrong with themselves or their children, they're more apt to go to the doctor. So I think that's a big issue that we face with conditions: heart attack, stroke, depression, suicide, prostate cancer, and lung cancer are the big things that men struggle with. And the depression is a surprising thing, but it makes sense. Men are 4 times more likely to kill themselves, suicide, than females because they don't tell anybody. They don't have any signs or symptoms of what they're actually going through. So that's a big struggle with men. And then obviously stroke and heart attack we struggle with because of diet and our environment. We're eating too many saturated fats. We're not getting enough cardiovascular exercise to be more like Herman is. So that's a constant struggle. And then obviously prostate cancer really falls into that area of going in, like you mentioned, seeing our doctor, getting that relationship, starting a dialogue so we get our exams done.
Yeah, I think one of the things about men that separates us from women is just being vulnerable, right? It's we have an avoidance of vulnerability. It's almost, we think it's a sign of weakness. Right. And when we go into the doctor, one of the things that we do is we make ourselves vulnerable. We make ourselves vulnerable to finding out, what might be wrong in our numbers. I always talk about, knowing your numbers. Mm-hmm. What are some of the numbers that we should be asking our doctors about?
I think the big thing is with males, you want to look at your cholesterol. That's a big one. Men typically struggle to produce more HDL cholesterol than females, so that's something they're going to get through their diet, eating more fish oils and cardiovascular exercise. Blood pressure is always a big thing. We always want to make sure our blood pressure is where it needs to be so we can avoid any strokes or any things like that. And then a big one that's became really prevalent over the last several years is watching our blood sugar. We really need to test our sugar and see where our glucose levels are at so we don't convert into a type 2 diabetic.
Father's Day is at the end of this week, right? And I'm sure all of you guys are gearing up for it. It's one of my favorite days. I get to spend it every year taking my daughters fishing. I go fishing one day a year. That's really all I have the skill for.
Do you catch anything?
we catch fish that are no bigger than this. That's all I can handle.
It's on the hook, though.
Yeah.
But let's just speak a little bit about our families and why Father's Day is important to each of us. I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, when you look at being a father now myself, I realize all the sacrifices and all the things that my dad did for me, my dad and my stepdad. I'm very lucky to have 2 of them, and they were very integral in my life, and always to continue to push me and put their arm around me, and give me a little nudge when I needed a nudge, and that's something that I want to do for my kids too. Mm-hmm.
Herman?
Is just leading that example and being able to reflect back at all the things that they've accomplished over their lives, and it's an unselfish thing as a parent that you do, because you're there for them 100% of the time as they're growing up and you're nurturing them through life. So it's good to be able to go back and reflect at this time and see where they are in life, and just so much more that's there waiting for them ahead.
Right. Your sons are grown and gone on their careers. And Ryan here, your kids are really young and dominating your time probably.
Yeah, can you come over and help me with these babysitting? I've got a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. And man, they're a lot. they're a handful. And it's funny, you know, we talk about Father's Day, and I still have a hard time remembering that I'm an actual father and that it's a part of my day too, and not just my dad or my stepdad or my father-in-law or something like that. I just take a little time for myself too. That's hard to remember sometimes.
Yeah, that taking a little time for yourself and for your kids and for your spouse and for your work, right? It puts a lot of pressure on the balance that we all need to achieve every day, right? In order to not be stressed and to not have the pressure of life on, you know, one of our components of life be too much for us. How do you strike that balance?
Well, it's an interesting question because with my schedule, and I have a very rare schedule, I'm done with work at 11 a.m. every day. So my wife works a normal 9 to 5 job, which is really 8 to 6. So when I get home at 11 o'clock, Mr. Mom over here at the Ermanni residence, and I remember the first 3 years we had Lydia, who's now 4, my wife didn't work. She recently went back to work, and I remember coming home, you know, whether it was, you know, at 11 a.m. or whether it was whatever I was doing, and she would be like, "Here," and I was a little taken back, and I would be like, "Well, I worked today. What did you do? You know, you're home with me."
Time out. That's what you call a timeout.
It's just an honest assessment, and I never understood what it really took to raise a child. And boy, do I have a dose of my own medicine, because now when she comes through that door at 6 o'clock, I am like, "Here you go. Here's both of them." And the respect that I have for parents, whether you're a mom, a dad, a single mom, a single dad, whatever the case may be, the work that goes into being a parent is unlike anything you will ever do in your life.
Yeah, I think it's all important for all of us who are dads to recognize why Mother's Day comes before Father's Day, right on the calendar.
Well, until you're in a situation, you really don't know what goes into somebody else's situation. That's right? You know, I never knew what it was like to be a stay-at-home mom. You never really understood what went into raising a child, and boy, do I have a greater understanding now.
Vince, as somebody who professionally you're focused on health and wellness all the time, how do you translate what you know in the work that you do into what you do at home with your kids and your family?
Yeah, I think you make it simple. You know, when you're talking about, like, let's talk about physical fitness, it doesn't mean that I have to have my kids, Kayla and Jackson. Kayla's 8, Jackson's 6. I don't need to have them down in the basement in my gym, bench pressing, lifting weights. It's doing things in the yard. It's playing soccer. It's going to the park. It's tricking them and taking them to Sky Zone and letting them jump around on trampolines for 2 hours, and they don't even realize they're exercising. And then doing things when you're eating dinner to educate them to be mindful of what they're eating. Okay, we're eating this because it's giving us protein. You're growing. You need fruits and vegetables. You need fiber. Having them understand it and not forcing it on them. They're kids. So I don't think it's realistic to think your kids are going to sit there and always eat grilled chicken and broccoli and brown rice. So I think doing things in moderation and just constantly introducing it into their life and making it fun.
Okay.
I think that's the best way.
And talk about work-life balance. When you were playing, your sons were little, right? So you were on the road with the team. You were working out at the training facility every day. You had team meetings. You had a lot going on during the season. You know, people who sort of casually watch professional football really don't understand just how hard all the players work in the off time, right? How did you balance what you needed to do to prepare for the next week's game with your family obligations?
There's a huge balance that you have to strike there, because it is such a taxing time. When you're playing professional sports, it encompasses everything. You're up early. You have to be in the stadium by, let's say, 8 a.m., and you're not out there till 4 or 5 o'clock. So that is their time. It's just like a regular job. And then when you get back, you still have to have that balance of home life. And for me, having my kids being young at that point, I wanted to be a father that was an integral part of their lives. And that is that bonding time that is necessary, that forms that healthy relationship between father and sons and parents and their kids. So it was just, I didn't think about it. I just went ahead and did it. And once you're in it, it becomes habit. It becomes those things where I start to reflect back also. I grew up in the environment wasn't bad, but it wasn't afforded what I was able to afford my kids. Single parent home, my mom was gone most of the time. Vince had mentioned about trying to transition kids into eating different foods. Well, I had to eat pretty much the same thing all the time. So even my eating habits I formed early in life, I had to break them as an adult. So it was trying to find those little small things that I knew that would make a difference in my kids' life by introducing them to certain foods and certain types of cultures and certain types of things that would help them to expand as kids. So trying to find that balance, it was a full-time job after I left a full-time job to come back and do that. And it was tough at one time, but as they get older and that hard work that you put in early to start to pay that way pays dividends later on.
Right. You talked about just now coaching your kids on nutrition, right? And Vince, you talked about it as well when you just spoke about it. One of the things that I do at home is I try to instill good nutritional choices in my two girls. I have two teenage girls at home. I wake up every morning before they go to school and I still make their school lunches, even though I have a high school freshman now. She could probably function on her own, right? Because it's my opportunity to engage with them around, having a good diet in a lunchbox. How important is that for parents to be able to work with their kids, either at the grocery store, at the kitchen counter when they're preparing meals, during various times in the day, to sort of do little things to coach them on making the right choices when it comes to nutrition?
I think it's extremely important. And my wife and I work together, Lisa, to make sure that we get them what they need. If we're packing snacks to go to the soccer game, we make sure that we're getting fruit in there. We're getting not a sports drink like Gatorade, because everybody wants to give their kids Gatorade, but there's so much sugar in there. They're not running a marathon. They don't really need that. So making sure they have water and making sure they have a healthy protein. And I think if you work with your spouse, and here's a big thing I think everybody needs to take away. If you want to eat healthy, and Herman probably knows this better than anybody, you have to plan. You have to plan the day out. You have to meal prep, and you have to have these things ready. So that's the thing my wife and I do is we plan the meals, we prep it, and then it's there and it's ready to go.
Ryan, do you have any specific strategies in your
Oh
house?
man, we're just trying to survive. It is survive and advance to the next day. I mean, my 4-year-old is very good about eating what we give her, very good with fruits and vegetables. However, the 2-year-old, he's a struggle. I mean, he might get graham crackers for dinner. He doesn't want to eat anything, but we try.
What are some of our own individual strategies for keeping ourselves healthy? Because when I talk about men's health, I say all the time, I say, part of the objective needs to be to stay in your family's life for as long as possible.
Absolutely.
We have too many men dying too early because we're not taking care of ourselves. So what are our strategies for doing that on a daily basis?
Well, when I struggled. I'm going to be very honest. When I left, because we were taught so much as athletes, you mask the pain. You get injured, you go back into the game. You avoid going and seeking attention and trying to see, okay, is there something wrong with me? I have this little ache or this pain or something that may be serious, but I prolonged that, I procrastinated and I put it off. And it wasn't until I had an episode of something that occurred to me health-wise in 2011 that I really started to understand I have to be on top of my health. I have to make sure that I'm going out and doing everything that is necessary to make sure that looking at my family history, to understanding my numbers and my levels, and understanding what is it I need to do to make sure that I can be here long term for those that depend on me. And that's when it took that life-changing situation, unfortunately, and that happens to most of us as men or people in general, before we go and we take the proactive approach and say, here's what I need to do to make sure I'm on top of my health.
Right, you get to your point of crisis and then you change. And I think what we're all here to sort of relate to you as the audience today is you don't have to wait that long. And Vince, what are some of the strategies that we all can, impart in our daily lives to avoid that crisis situation?
I think the number one thing is time. So, as a dad, a working dad, I have 2 kids. I'm always trying to steal time. I'm sure all of you are super busy. So if you can set aside time, you're going to be successful. What I do, and I'm not telling everybody to do this, but I get up at 4:30 in the morning so I can work out in the morning because it's uninterrupted. I'm not at work. Nobody's calling me. I'm not going to run into anything. My kids are still sleeping. So I think if you can find a particular time during your day where you're not going to be interrupted and you can be consistent, I think that's a big thing. I think you need to do something you enjoy. I enjoy lifting weights. If people want to CrossFit, if they want to play basketball, if they want to play soccer, whatever they want to do, they need to be interested because they will sustain it a lot longer. And then you need to build a relationship with your PCP. You need to have that conversation. You need to talk to them so he understands what kind of health issues you may have went through in the past, or things that you're trying to avoid and things that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Ryan?
You know, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you guys that I'm the most, active person out there, but I try to get my 10,000 steps in per day, whether it's just chasing the kids around or taking them for walks when it's nice. I have recently lost about 25 pounds. Awesome. Within the last year and a half. It's been over a course of time, and I recently quit smoking. I'm coming up on 10 months. So that was, I don't want to die, you know, and the older I get, and with my 2 little ones, I just want to be around a little while. So recently quit smoking. Coming up on 10 months, I'm going to get to that year and then keep going.
It's hard to do. It's hard to do, but it is probably the best thing that you can do for your good health is to quit smoking and then get into a good habit of routines, right? To eat better and then exercise.
Yeah, after 20 years of doing it, I think there's enough research now that indicates it's a good time to quit.
Yeah. Speaking of habits, that's one of the things that we try to coach at Blue Cross is to, all of our members to do the same thing in the same way to build those healthy habits. How long does it take to develop a good healthy habit?
That's a great question. I'm really glad that Ryan said it took time for the 25 pounds, because everybody needs to understand, and Herman can attest to this, it took him a lifetime to become a pro football player. It's like building a house. So if you want to lose 20 pounds, it's going to take, you should plan 6 to 8 months. You shouldn't think about losing 4 or 5 pounds a week because it's not healthy. You need to build the habits. You need to make sure you're doing stuff that's sustainable, not just jumping on a fad diet or something like that. So everything takes time, whether you're building muscle, you want to run a marathon, you want to lose weight, you want to quit smoking, all those types of things are going to take time. So you need to set realistic goals and make sure you manage them accordingly.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about age for our older audience too. I'll point to Herman, but I don't mean to, point to Herman.
It's okay. I mean, you want. I understand. I already mentioned I'm the only one here without hair, so I get it. But
I'm putting myself in that same boat. But the fact is that when your body gets older, right, it doesn't work the same as it did when it was younger. Talk about that from your own perspective and experience. How has age affected your ability to be an athlete?
Well, I used to be able to bounce back quite a bit. You get an injury, you bounce right back. Even from eating, it wasn't a problem. My metabolism's a lot faster, so shedding weight and shedding pounds was a lot easier. But as you get older, the metabolism slows down slightly. You become a little bit less active. And because of that, there are some things you have to do to offset that, whether it be adjusting your diet, whether it be being a little bit more active, even if you're in an office environment. When I made the transition from playing football and going into becoming a business owner, it became a little bit more sitting. So I had to be a little bit more conscious of making sure I get cardiovascular activity in, making sure that I'm being conscious of the foods that I'm eating and how often I'm eating. Most time people think that you eat less food and you lose weight. Not realizing that you're starting to store fat, and you're starting to store a little bit more than, because the body doesn't want to release it. So for me, it was understanding, make sure I'm constantly being conscious of all the things that's going to affect my health. Now, I get out of the bed, it's a little bit harder sometimes. It's you start to hear bones start to pop and creak, and you go, where did that sound? You're thinking someone else is in your house. You're looking around, and it's you. It's me that's making all that noise. And so those are some of the things that I've had to battle with, back issues, and we talked off a little bit earlier. Being in the tough, violent sport of football, I had a lot of injuries, I had a lot of concussions, and because of that, you start to have some cognitive issues. So there are changes that not only through my previous profession, but just the fact of getting older that affect me now in my life.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I know it. I feel it every day. Your body is just, it's wearing the age, right? And, my joints do crack a little bit. My knees are a little bit weaker sometimes when I'm climbing stairs. And that's just it. But Ryan, you were talking about 10,000 steps, and I don't think there's a better program out there for everybody that's watching right now. Yeah. Unless you have a physical disability that prevents you from standing up and walking, getting your steps in every day. You do 10,000 a day. What are some tips that we can give people who want to start a walking routine? How long do they have to do it every day? How many steps should they be targeting every day? What are some insights that we can give them?
I think that's all dependent on their level, like you mentioned, what people are working with. I think, consult with your physician to see what kind of health status you're in. Getting a good pair of walking shoes, going to a walking store, because footwear is really a big deal when we start talking about putting in a lot of steps. 10,000 is a great goal for someone like Ryan that's been doing it. But again, if you're just starting, start with 2,000, then work your way to 3,000 the next month, then 4,000, then 5,000, and so forth. So I think it depends your level and the kind of conversation you have with your physician, what you can sustain. And the thing I like about the walking program, the 10,000 steps a day, is I truly believe that everyone should get up and do something physical every day, whether it's walking, playing with your kids, gardening. Anything that gets you up and gets you moving, I think is a good thing. And it doesn't mean you have to go to a gym. People need to understand that you can get up and be physical and do things around your house and with your family.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, we talk about physical activity and exercise as being a social activity too.
Absolutely.
You were talking about going to the gym or being with your family. It's Father's Day's coming up, and it's a great time for all of us dads, right, to sort of recommit to engaging with our families around these good habits, around better health. Is there something that you do every day or that you do every day with your family that, is a tradition, that's a healthy thing that you feel that your kids are going to learn from and engage on? Herman, I know that your sons are gone on their careers, but can you point to something that you as a family did together that was health and fitness oriented?
We're a big pet family, and so taking the dogs out was a great one. And then the kids going out to the park, or we would have them in some type of sport or activity that allowed them to get out and really run and stretch their legs and really engage into that physical fitness and that physical activity side of it. But it's just those small things like that, going on walks or just going out to the park on a nice day that goes a long way in terms of developing those habits. But again, coupling that with making sure, introducing them at an early age to eating various foods, and so they wouldn't become as picky as I was all the way up into my 30s and 40s. And I don't want to, I'm pushing certain things away that I know are going to give me long-term good health benefits. So those are some of the things that we really kind of focused on with our kids earlier.
Vince, healthy traditions at home?
I don't think there's any traditions. I like to trick them. We limit their iPad time. We say you can do 20 minutes on the iPad if we go to the park and spend an hour there. I like to trick my kids into being physically fit, because then it's not forced. They feel like we're having fun, we're doing things together. And like Herman said, we have them in a ton of activities. We have them in gymnastics, we have them in soccer, we have them in ice skating. We do as much as we can do with them without burning them out to keep them active. And when you do stuff like that, they don't really put two and two together that they're being so physically active. They just think they're going somewhere to do something, so that we trick them.
Yeah, and that's my strategy at home too. I have two girls. They play sports all seasons long, right? They're in swimming, they're in soccer. They are out and about, and what we do is we positively reinforce them being in the activities. Instead of grumping about taking them here and there to games or whatever, to practices, we're all in, and we're talking to them when they wake up in the morning about what they're doing that day. Absolutely. And they know that it's important to us too, and I think that is a strategy that every parent can deploy at home, is just to invest in your kids and make sure that they understand that when they're playing sports, that it's good for them. Mm-hmm. It's good for them socially, it's good for them physically, and it's something that we as parents support. I think that sends a huge positive message to them.
Yeah, I think as far as healthy habits, I try to be present when I'm there, when I'm with them. Obviously taking them to the park and letting them run around at the high school field. We live by a high school, just letting them run around there. That's all great. But one thing I noticed was I was on my cell phone a lot. I would look at this thing, and then my 4-year-old daughter, my 2-year-old son wanted to take that phone and want to look at pictures or want to be on YouTube and want to look at it. Right. So I had to make a decision to just, when I'm home, I'm very hard to get in touch with, because I try to put the phone away and not look at it. I want to be present with them. I want them to not see me on that device. So I think at an early age where my kids are, I think that's the best thing I can do for them now, because we are so married to our devices now. I think that's the healthiest trait I could give to them right now.
Okay, so here we are, we're all fathers, and we probably all have different perspectives on this, but let's start at this end of the table. What is the most rewarding part about being a father?
When my daughter smiles at me at night and says, "I love you, Daddy."
Yeah.
There's all the whining. I have the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, and all the whining and all the this and all the that and all the hustle and bustle. But at the end of the night, when she goes down to bed and she says, "I love you, Daddy. You're a good daddy," that to me is the best thing she could ever say to me, and it makes me feel like it's all worth it.
Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Vince?
I think it's being a teacher. I had an example the other day. I was telling Kayla about something in soccer and how to use her body, and she went out and did it, and she scored a goal. I wanted to come to tears because she listened to what I told her. Not because she scored a goal, but she listened. Or when I was teaching Jackson how to shake somebody's hand and give them eye contact. So it's being a teacher to your kids and making them to be good decision makers. I think that's the most valued thing that I like as a father.
Awesome. Herman?
For me, it's when my grown men now come up to me and they're looking at me eye to eye and they say thank you and they love me for even the tough times I had with them, and some of the times when I had to be a father and had to say no and had to give them some answers they didn't want to hear. But as grown men now, they appreciate it and they understood now why I told them what I told them, and they appreciate it. And when they give you that hug, it's just something, even though they're big now and they're my size, it brings me back to a place when they were younger, and it's the reason why we become fathers.
Good. And hopefully soon your sons will be fathers on their own, right?
You're going too fast. I didn't go that far.
Ready to be a grandpa, right?
I'm not ready to start back over and all of a sudden have grandkids hanging out at the house. I'm enjoying this time. And there's a time where you have to have a little peace and quiet, just a little bit.
Well, let's just say down the road they do become young dads in the future, and you're a young father yourself, right? What advice would you give them about being a father?
I would start with this, and we hear often, you try and keep kids away from making mistakes. I don't mind so much that my kids make mistakes. I want to give them some things that will help them grow, and I want to allow them to have that because that is the way we grow. So it's not avoiding too many things, but knowing when to be there and when not to, when to grab and lead and when to let them lead. There's a definite balance that needs to take place there to help them become those great people later, and also always be people of character. That's the one thing you had to have on the selfish part of you, and you have to go out and be there for others, more so than just all about yourself. And that is something that if I had to tell my kids one thing, just be men of character.
Oh, that's wisdom right there. Ryan?
I would tell somebody thinking about starting a family, there is no script. There's a lot of ad-libbing that are going on. There's no book that's going to tell you how to be a good dad. You will figure it out. There will be pain, there will be joy, there will be happiness, there will be sadness, and that's all part of being a dad. You will figure it out.
Vince?
A couple things. So I think patience is a big thing when you're a parent. You have to be very patient. And for me, I'm a little bit rougher, is telling my kids, you're not special. The world is a very tough place, and things are going to be really hard. And it's when you get knocked down, how you get back up is going to define who you are. So I think there is a lot of, the participation trophies and, oh, you're so special. They're special to me, but they need to understand there's a whole world out there that isn't going to adapt to them. They have to adapt to it.
Be present in your own life by going to your doctor and keeping the annual doctor's appointment. Know your numbers. Work with your doctor on a health plan. We're all unique. We're all different. And so, working with your physician on a health plan is very important. Make sure you incorporate healthy eating and physical activity into your day every day, and be present in the lives of your kids. I mean, we as dads, we're setting an example. We set an example for good or for bad, right, with our kids. And it's best to set a good, healthy example at every engagement with our kids. Show them the way. So I want to thank our guests. I want to thank Ryan Ermanni. I want to thank Herman Moore and Vince McKinnon for this very Healthier Michigan Table Talk, and wish all you dads out there and grandfathers a happy Father's Day.